U.S. hunts for hidden Chinese malware in defense systems that may disrupt military operations. Study: made in China solar panels 3 times more carbon intensive than UN claims. Beijing and Moscow tighten ties with North Korea, causing Asia to fall into Cold War 2.0. Foreign investment fled. Chinese premier uses trick to save the situation. The U.S. is actively searching for Chinese malware hidden in various defense systems, which could potentially disrupt military communications and resupply operations. According to a New York Times report on July 29th, U.S. officials believe that malicious computer code has been concealed within networks controlling power grids, communication systems, and water supplies that feed military bases, raising concerns that hackers could jeopardize U.S. military operations during conflicts. A congressional official described the discovered malware as a ticking time bomb, warning that it could allow China to cut off power, water, and communications to military bases, significantly hindering deployments and resupply operations. He said the shared supply infrastructure between military bases, civilian homes, and businesses means many other Americans could also be affected in an attack. The White House responded to inquiries from the Times, but the statement did not specifically mention China or the military bases. The acting spokesman for the National Security Council, Adam R. Hodge, said, "The Biden administration is working relentlessly to defend the United States from any disruptions to our critical infrastructure, including by coordinating interagency efforts to protect water systems, pipelines, rail and aviation systems, among others." Last week, the email account of U.S. Ambassador to China Nicholas Burns was hacked, raising further concerns about cybersecurity threats from China. In earlier July, Microsoft confirmed a China-based hacking operation that breached email accounts in 24 organizations, including some federal agencies. The incident reportedly gave the Chinese government insights into U.S. thinking, ahead of Secretary of State Antony Blinken's visit to Beijing in June. U.S. officials have consistently considered China the most advanced among U.S. adversaries in cyberspace, a domain that has been a source of bilateral tension in recent years. According to the FBI, Beijing's extensive hacking program surpasses all other governments combined. During a meeting with a senior Chinese diplomat in Indonesia, Blinken addressed the hacking incidents. However, specific details regarding the extent of the discussion were not disclosed.
A recent study conducted by the nonprofit organization Environmental Progress in collaboration with the Blind Spot and analyst Enrico Mariucci suggested that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, a United Nations body, has vastly underestimated the carbon emissions associated with Chinese-made solar panels. According to the report, solar panels produced in China emit about 3 times more carbon during their production than the IPCC claims. Environmental Progress founder Michael Stellenberger stated in a tweet, "People say solar panels don't produce carbon emissions, but they do." And now, a major new investigation by Environmental Progress, drawing on the research of Enrico Mariucci, finds that solar panels made in China produce at least 3 times more carbon emissions than IPCC claims. Specifically, the IPCC claims that the carbon footprint of solar panels, most of which are made in China, is about 48 grams of carbon dioxide, CO2 per kilowatt hour, kWh, while Mariucci's research suggests the actual emissions are closer to 170 to 250 grams of CO2 per kWh, between 3 to 5 times higher than the UN's estimation. In April, Mariucci published a report titled The Dirty Secret of Solar Industry, arguing that the IPCC's calculations were based on a Europe-based low-carbon supply chain rather than the coal-intensive production processes used in China. The reliance on modeling and assumptions, as well as the lack of transparency and accurate data from Chinese manufacturers, have contributed to the underestimation of the true carbon intensity of solar panels. We're investigating hundreds of billions of dollars a year in technologies that are low carbon only because someone wrote it down somewhere, he said in an executive summary of his report. According to Environmental Progress and findings of Enrico Mariucci, a data analyst from Rome, the data used to estimate the carbon emissions of solar panel production is flawed. The carbon intensity of solar panels manufactured in China and installed in European countries has been significantly underestimated, leading to the incorrect perception that solar energy is much greener than it actually is. The root of the problem lies in the lack of accurate data from China, where a major portion of solar panel manufacturing takes place. The data compilers and organizations like the International Energy Agency, IEA, rely heavily on models and assumptions extrapolated from Western manufacturing processes rather than obtaining real-world data from China. Econevent, a widely used database of environmental impact assessments, has also been criticized for its lack of Chinese data, despite its influence on policymakers and the sustainability industry. Dr. Rolf Frischknecht, the founder of Econevent, resigned from the organization due to disagreements over data quality and methodology. The lack of transparency and accurate data from China has raised concerns about the reliability of the data used for renewable energy certificates and policy decisions. Enrico Mariucci and other critics argue that the reliance on flawed data may lead to an unwarranted rush to transition to solar and other renewables without solid evidence of their actual benefits. Over the years, China has become a dominant player in the solar panel market, with about 97% of global solar wafer production in the country. However, China's competitive advantage is not rooted in technological innovation, but in factors such as cheap coal-fired energy, government subsidies, and low labor costs. The study's findings have raised concerns about the environmental impact of solar panel production and the lack of proper recycling measures. The high recycling costs and heavy metals, like lead, in solar panels create significant challenges in managing the waste generated by the solar industry. Proper recycling incentives and measures are needed to address the rising mountain of solar panel trash. Schellenberger has long warned about the holistic environmental impacts of the solar panel industry, pointing out that the technology's advocacy is often driven by ideological beliefs rather than sound science.
For the first time since the COVID pandemic broke out, North Korea invited representatives of the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP regime, to visit, coinciding with the 70-year anniversary of the end of the Korean War. Lee Hom-jong, vice chairman of the Standing Committee of the Chinese National People's Congress, representing Beijing, presented a letter from the CCP's General Secretary Xi Jinping to Kim Jong-un. According to Nikkei, during a meeting with Lee, Kim said that Beijing sending a representative showed the General Secretary's will to attach great importance to the DPRK-China friendship. Commenting on the news, Ji-tun Ju, a professor of political science and international relations at Bucknell University, said, "From the strategic perspective, a strong China-DPRK relationship can help both countries to deflect pressure from the U.S. Zhou added, "Both North Korea and China view the expanding U.S. presence in the region and beefed-up U.S. alliances with South Korea and Japan as a security threat." Moscow also sent Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu to attend the event in North Korea. North Korea's media reported that Shoigu handed Kim a warm and good letter from Putin. At a reception held for the Russian delegation, Shoigu said that the North Korean army has become the most powerful in the world, and that Moscow wants to promote multifaceted cooperation with Pyongyang. On the other side of the Korean peninsula, Seoul promotes close cooperation with the US and Japan. According to Ju, the apparent existence of the two blocs is making the scene in East Asia now like Cold War 2.0. Following the opening up after the COVID pandemic, the Chinese economy faced a decline in the three carriages that drove its rapid growth: exports, investment, and consumption, which led to a severe recession. During an inspection in Shanghai on July 26th and 27th, Premier Li Qiang of the State Council of China emphasized the need to promote the development of foreign companies in China and attract foreign investment. Premier Li also highlighted the importance of constructing a pilot free trade zone and taking exploratory steps to promote high-level opening up, focusing on creating breakthroughs. However, Professor Xie Tian of the Aiken School of Business at the University of South Carolina expressed skepticism about the CCP's efforts. He said, "The era of Li Keqiang, former Prime Minister of China, has ambitions and establishes a free trade zone in Shanghai, hoping to displace Hong Kong. Now, Shanghai has not become the original Hong Kong. The original Hong Kong has also been crippled by the CCP. Telling the story of foreign business people in China is to continue to deceive people. No one believes the Chinese government can do a good job of the economy. Even the Wall Street bosses who always provide huge investments to the CCP no longer believe in the Chinese government. Now, investment has decreased. Foreign capital is still withdrawing. The Wall Street Journal quoted Mark Witzke, an analyst at Rhodium Group of Government Data on July 13th, who said, "Foreign direct investment in China has fallen to $20 billion in the first quarter of this year, compared to $100 billion in the same period last year." According to set data platform Pre-Chin, China-focused general partners raised only $5.5 billion in capital in the first half of this year, far behind the $27.6 billion in the same period last year. Tie Tian believed that the economic environment in China has worsened due to the crackdown on private companies and individuals, prioritizing state-owned enterprises, and political authoritarianism. Other countries like Vietnam have overshadowed the low labor cost advantage that once attracted investors. The US sanctions and tariffs have also contributed to transferring industrial chains and orders away from China. The BBC recently reported that Li Mengdu, a Taiwanese businessman, was imprisoned in China for nearly 2 years. He faced legal challenges and was restricted from leaving the country for a further 2 years. Chinese police arrested him for taking and broadcasting photos of Chinese troops gathering at the Shenzhen border during the anti-extradition movement in Hong Kong. He was sentenced to 1 year and 10 months in prison and stripped of his political rights for 2 years on suspicion of spying for foreign countries and illegally providing state secrets. Observers claimed that the CCP's anti-spying law, which came into effect on July 1st, had heightened anxiety and insecurity among companies in China, as their everyday business activities could be deemed violations of the law, potentially leading to imprisonment. Political freedom is seen as a critical element for economic development. Commentator Gu Chunqiu emphasizes that under the rule of the CCP, a tense political environment leads to financial constraints and a lack of progress for the people and businesses. Gu Chunqiu said, "Political freedom is seen as a critical element for economic development. China's economy takes off when the CCP's governance loses power. Under the rule of the CCP, the more tense the political environment, the tighter the economy. Basically, suffocated. The people have no way out, and no businesses can escape.